morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm especially excited to welcome students from McCaskey High School. Yay. And also we have a lot of members from our community here, as well as our students and staff, so I'm very excited for you to be here. And I'm excited to introduce Mr. Jondhi Harrell. Jondhi is the founder and executive director of the Center for Returning Citizens in Philadelphia. And he served 25 years in custody, but upon release in 2009, he completed a BS in Human Service Management and is currently enrolled in Temple's Master's in Social Work program. So the Center for Returning Citizens offers comprehensive services for formerly incarcerated individuals. Mr. Harrell is also co-clerk of the Germantown Friends, Peace and Social Justice Committee. He serves on the National Committee of Alternatives to Violence Reentry Program. He's an organizer for the Formerly Incarcerated and Families Working Group, the Decarcerate Pennsylvania. And he served on the executive committee of the Coalition Against Mass Incarceration and is also co-founder of the Block Party, which stands for Build, Lobby, Organize, Campaign. So I'm very excited to invite Jondhi to the stage. One thing I would like to mention before we start is that tonight Jondhi will be joining us at 6 p.m. in the Stair Auditorium to facilitate a discussion on the film we're showing, which is Broken on All Sides, a documentary that was put together by students at the University of Penn that also focuses on the issue of mass incarceration. So please join us then as well at 6. So thank you everyone for being here, and I introduce Mr. Jondhi Harrell.
Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. And prior to speaking, let me say a few words of my journey, how I came to be here. In 1991, I was convicted of bank robbery, and it was my second offense, and I was given a 20-year sentence. In the federal system, you do 85% of your time. So I was looking at the next 18 years of being incarcerated. That was a daunting proposition, not only in my mind, but in reality. I was going to be away from my family for the next 18 years. My children were going to grow up without me. My parents were going to get older and older without me. I was one of the foundation stones of my family, and I was going to be lost to them for the next 2 decades. On a personal level, how was I going to survive 18 years of incarceration? What was I going to do? How would I function? And what had brought me to this point in my life? Because I like to think I was a good father and a good person, yet a judge says that you are not fit to live in our society for the next 20 years. So obviously, what I was doing was not working. Not for me, not for my family, not for my community. I was a bank robber, I was a gangster, I sold guns, I ran certain sections of the city. That's what we do as persons who are on the criminal side of life. So I had to take stock on who I was as a person. I said I was a good father, but I was going to spend many years away from my family. I called myself a good husband, but I was now leaving my wife to fend for herself. So I was incarcerated, and in the first year and a half, 2 years of my incarceration, I spent a lot of time in intense introspection, looking at myself, looking at my life, trying to figure out what I wanted to do for the next 18 years. I was blessed while at Lewisburg Penitentiary to come into the circle of Dr. Tupac Shakur. Any rap fans in here? Got a room full of kids, you gotta have some rap fans. Who's the best rapper in the universe? Who? Speak up, speak up. Tupac. Who said that? Stand up, please. Give this man a round of applause. For that is my view also, that Tupac Shakur is the best rapper in the universe. And that was by virtue of the fact that he was heavily influenced by Matula Shakur, who is not only his stepfather, but the co-founder of the Nation of New Africa. I met Dr. Shakur in 1992 while in Lewisburg, and for the next 12 years, I worked side by side with him in 3 different penitentiaries. His philosophy was that we must put aside what we've done in the past, reform ourselves, transform ourselves into something new, better, brighter, stronger. Look back into our past. He taught us the word Sankofa, which literally means to look back into the past and to draw from the African culture of our past and to reform our minds and our hearts. And we formed what we called a circle of consciousness. And all the brothers in the jails who wanted to transform themselves, who wanted to learn, came to us. And we had ordinary prisoners. But we also gathered the writers and the thinkers and the musicians and the rappers, and we formed a community, a family inside of the prison. And we were the educational, intellectual, creative heartbeat of that prison. Because prison is a society like any other societies. There's different social classes, there's many different minds and individuals, and many different things happen in the prison. You have guys who continue their same activities. They were gangsters when they got there, and they're gangsters when they leave because they didn't take that time to look at themselves, to reform themselves, to transform themselves and say, when I leave these prison doors, I'm going to go out and be someone else. So within that circle of consciousness, we worked so that when we came home, we could not only celebrate our freedom, but we could repent of our past actions and give back to the communities that we helped destroy. The reality is, when you sell drugs in your community, when you murder someone, when you commit robbery or all manner of crimes, you are committing to the destruction of your community. We taught the young brothers in our class, you think that the police are your enemies? You think the system is your enemy? You are the enemy of our community. When you sell drugs in our community, you are breaking down the family structure. You are sending kids to bed at hungry, sending kids to bed at night hungry because their mothers have spent the money on drugs. You are causing chaos in the neighborhoods. When folks get killed in the neighborhood by a stray bullet, a little kid is walking down the street and he gets a gun down, he has nothing to do with that. It's the warring parties that are warring over the drug turf that is a part of that. And we were all a part of that. We were responsible for that. All of the significant criminal events that happened in our neighborhood, we were a part of it. So Dr. Shakur taught us to take responsibility for our own lives. And while we were inside, to begin the process of transformation, so when we came home, we could begin to rebuild our community. I've been home for 5.5 years now. I came home in 2009. And all the work that I've been able to accomplish in that period of time, I lay at his feet. I lay at the feet of those who work with me. Because what I'm doing here this morning, speaking to you, I did for 16 years inside of the prison. In our circle of consciousness, we created programs so that the brothers inside could become public speakers, could become writers. We had a writing class that was so outstanding that one of our writers, Leon Sullivan, is on the street right now, and he owns his own publishing company. And he publishes books of those who are inside. All that was due to what we did inside, because we were inside of mass incarceration. So when I come to you today to speak about mass incarceration, I come from a unique standpoint. 25 years on the inside, and the 5 years that I've been home, going to college, working as a social worker, working in the community, trying to direct the struggle against mass incarceration from our own vantage point in the city of Philadelphia. Because that's what it is. It is a struggle against a system. While I was inside, one of the things I did as part of our programs was spoken word. And I have written a piece called I Cant Breathe that I'd like to share with you before I go into the main body of my discourse. And it speaks to our current system of social injustice in America. For mass incarceration and social injustice go hand in hand. That's one thing we really have to keep in mind. When you talk about mass incarceration, you are not just talking about people inside of prison cells. You're talking about the conditions that led to that. You're talking about neighborhoods where we don't control our economy. You're talking about young people with no job prospects or no educational prospects. All of these things lead to mass incarceration. And social injustice, the random shooting of black youth, that all fits into that scene because our lives don't matter. The slogan, Black Lives Matter, is a slogan. For in this country, black lives have not really mattered. I can't breathe. I can't breathe for fear of being caught up in the plague that is spreading, spores infecting the streets, drifting through towns and cities, a silent, deadly aura of police supremacy. I can't breathe the noxious air that is shared by those who would shoot me 6 times as I attempt to surrender. I can't breathe when I am choked, when my neck is broken, and I'm callously thrown in the back of a police van. I can't breathe when I'm 12 years old and I'm gunned down in the park for the simple crime of being black and playing with a toy gun. I can't breathe when wearing a hoodie means I'm a thug and a threat, and you bet my killer will never face justice. I can't breathe when I lie in cold, hard ground, watered by my mother's tears, the realization of all her fears, and a generation learns all over again what it means to be black in America. I can't breathe. I can't breathe when I'm sitting in my car playing music that I love, and a white man who I have never seen before walks up and pumps shells into me just because he hates blacks, kids, hip-hop, and everything that it stands for. I can't breathe when it's not safe to walk while black, drive while black, think while black, talk while black, live while black. I can't breathe while those who are pledged to protect and serve are the ones to be most feared. I can't breathe when I am targeted, stopped and frisked, perceived to be criminal, as if my very nature could be discerned by the shade of my skin. I can't breathe if I am seen to be subhuman. I can't breathe when politicians make excuses and talk about black on black crime at a time when it is simply deadly to be black and young and unaware of the true reality of America. I can't breathe when my murder is sanctioned by society, argued on Face the Nation, condoned by right-wing talk show hosts, debated by politicians, and exploited by professional activists. I can't breathe when the media never talks about all the good things that happen in black neighborhoods, all the black fathers and mothers who work so hard every day to create lives for their kids. I can't breathe when our reality has become a slogan, words on a t-shirt, soon to be commercialized and sold in 30-second segments. I can't breathe when our lives are trivialized. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe when professional activists are co-opting the message and the depression that envelops ordinary black people goes unreported or is distorted by mainstream, selling the dream media. I can't breathe when people raise their arms in protest one day out of the month, but never raise their hands to put in work. I can't breathe when people will climb on a bus to go to DC, to parade in front of cameras, but will walk past a young brother in need right there on the sidewalk. I can't breathe when death has become a commodity and the voices of black families, their pain and frustration and their fear has become totally muffled in the mass hysteria. I can't breathe when the simple act of filming the police can now be seen as a threat to life and limb. I can't breathe when the death of 2 policemen means a heightened sense of awareness and an escalation of a war where the death tolls are so grossly one-sided. I can't breathe when the president and the attorney general of our country are not presiding and holding up justice, and the fact that we have a black president means less than nothing. I can't breathe when there is no value on the life of a black man, when there is no sanction for the soul of a black man, where there is no meaning in the system, where there is no apology for the injury to the minds of black people, and where there is no justice, and where there will be no peace. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. My reason for being here today is to talk about mass incarceration in real terms. And when we do that, we must come square to the fact that the system of mass incarceration is created and is sustained because it's useful and profitable. Mass incarceration is an $80 billion a year business. Think about that, $80 billion a year. How do you dismantle a system that is making that much money? That is the task that we are faced with. This is an industry that is built on white supremacy, class, economics, and a total disregard for black culture, black community, and black life. Mass incarceration is a system that is built upon the control and the exploitation of the lower class. So it's not just a racial issue, it's a class issue. Its components are time-honed and powerful. It's comprised of centuries of racial discrimination, oppression, human rights violations, terrorism, and social injustice. Mass incarceration is an outgrowth of the past. From the footprints of the first African to set their foot on the soil of this country, entering a slave-based society, for this is what that America is. Understand that. The beginning of America was a slave-based society. And America has been built upon slavery. And mass incarceration is an outgrowth of slavery. Many times I've heard people say, I don't understand why you black people keep on going back to slavery. Slavery's been over 200 or 300 years. Why do you keep talking about slavery? Systems like mass incarceration had their roots in slavery. And the same mentality and attitude, and often the same structures used for slavery, were transferred over to mass incarceration. Slavery. On January 31st, 1865, Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, and later on that year, on December 6th, they ratified it. The 13th Amendment was purportedly written to abolish slavery in the United States. Did it do that? Listen to the wording of the 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime, whereof the party shall, having been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So the 13th Amendment really didn't abolish slavery in the United States. It merely transferred the power to enslave Africans from the fortresses, ships, plantations, and auction blocks to police stations, courthouses, chain gangs, and cell blocks. For 25 years, I was virtually a slave of the federal system. I had to get up and work every day in one of their factories or one of their institutions. And if I didn't do that, I was put in the hole. All across this country, in Unicor Federal Industries, you have slave labor. This slave labor starts at 22 cents an hour. I started working for 22 cents. I got my first raise at 44 cents. Oh, what a joyous day that was. Then it went to 66, 88, and finally I hit super grade and I was making $1.10 an hour. That is slave labor. And that happens all over this country in state and federal institutions. Millions upon millions of dollars are generated by slave labor in this country inside of our prison systems. But you thought the 13th Amendment had abolished slavery. I wonder how many females, and maybe some males, in this audience have on Victoria's Secret underwear, lingerie, bras, panties, boxer shorts. Victoria's Secret uses slave labor in prisons to manufacture these goods. So next time you go into the mall, walk past the Victoria's Secret store. They're a part of mass incarceration in this country. When I worked in the Unicor prison industries, we made all manner of things. We did towels, sheets, blankets for the Red Cross. We did all the uniforms for the armed forces, not only in this country, but in other countries. These are jobs that could be held by people on the street. When you look at the black community and you drive down and you see guys standing on the corner with no jobs, they could be doing jobs if the industries were on the outside instead of the inside. Why should I have to go to prison in order to find a job? And that's the reality of mass incarceration in this country. Mass incarceration is a natural progression of, it is the son of slavery. Jim Crow and the Black Codes as a system never respected the voices of black people, the lives of black people, or their aspirations for the present or the future. it never saw us as human beings fit to be on an equal level with white society. That's what mass incarceration is. Understand that. Mass incarceration made it a crime to be black in America. This legal system was used as a control mechanism, a social and economic tool to continue the oppression and the suppression of the African population in America. Let me give you one example. The years from 18 to 26, 26 to 35 are the prime years of a person's life. In that period of time, you should be completing your high school education, going to college or vocational school. You should be establishing your credit. You should be looking to buy property, buying a car. You should be laying a foundation for your future. You should be thinking about entrepreneurship so that you can build wealth in your community. In the black community, those are the prime years when males are taken out of our community. So instead of that process being done, these men are incarcerated. And when they come home, if they come home 5, 10, 15 years later, they are always chasing an elusive dream because the years when they were supposed to be there, laying that foundation for the future, building wealth in their community, they were not there. In the so-called third world countries, we speak of the disappeared ones, those who have disappeared into the maws of dictatorships, totalitarian regimes, hundreds of thousands of them missing, individuals that are lost, never to be seen again. Yet in the world of Africans in America, in the world of mass incarceration, there have always been the disappeared ones, whole generations swallowed up by the justice system. Where's Charles at? I ain't seen him in about 4 or 5 months. Are you kidding? He got booked. He got a 5 to 20. You ain't gonna see him for 5 more years. People disappear routinely from our community for short periods of time, for longer periods of time, and also for life. We don't call life sentences life sentences. Words are important. We call a life sentence death by incarceration. That's what it is. Call things what they are. If you take one thing away from my presentation this morning, it's that words have power. Terms have power. How we view things determines reality. If you sit in your living room and you allow mass incarceration to grow unchecked in this country, you are condoning that system. And it's a terrible system. A couple stats. Everywhere I go, I give stats. Stats are important because it shows you the reality of what is happening. African Americans are 12 to 13% of the American population, but they're 60% of the almost 2.1 million male inmates in jail and prison. Let's put that in perspective. In India, which is a country of 1 billion people, they have a prison population of 300,000. So we're talking about 30 people per 100,000 of the population. But according to the US Census, nearly half of America's 19 million black men are under the age of 35, and the ratio for young black male imprisonment is 10%. So we're talking 10,000 prisoners per 100,000. Place this in context. Everyone knows what apartheid here is, right? We're all familiar with the South African state of apartheid. During the height of apartheid, their rate was 851 prisoners for every 100,000 people. So the system of mass incarceration in America is 10 times more deadly than apartheid. What kind of stat is that for a country that purports to be the beacon of democracy? Another stat. We can't just look at the 2.1 million people who are physically incarcerated, because incarceration comes in all forms. I'll give you an example. I did 18 years straight on my last sentence. And the wisdom of the feds, they said, well, if you do a long time in jail, you need at least a 6-month period for you to adjust to being back in society. I didn't need 6 months to adjust. All I needed was for them to open that door and let me out. So I said, well, I don't want to go to halfway house. Send me home to my family. They said, you go to the halfway house or you go to the hole. And we will set your date back. For all the time you spend in the hole protesting going to the halfway house, that time won't count. So I had to go to the halfway house. The 6 months I spent in the halfway house was the worst 6 months of the entire 18 years. I was treated with more disrespect in a place that was supposed to help me transition back into freedom than I was treated in the worst prisons that I was in. And I was in all high-level federal prisons. USP Terre Haute, which is now the prison you go to when you have a death sentence. USP Lewisburg, USP Atlanta, USP Coleman, Florida. These were serious prisons. But the level of treatment that I received in the halfway house was worse. And these are people who are given the mandate to help you to flow back into society. So when you talk about the prison population, you have to talk about those who are physically incarcerated in prison, those who are in halfway houses, those who are in county jails, because that is the feeder system for the prison, and those who are on probation and parole. So the stats are 1,574,000 in state and fed prison, 731,200 in county jails, 853,200 on parole, 3,910,300 on probation, meaning that there are currently, according to the 2013 census, which is probably more now, 7,041,700 persons under correction control. That's the system of mass incarceration in this country, over 7 million people. If we use that standard 60% rate, we're talking about 4.2 million black people. Here's another stat, and then I'm about done with stats for a minute. In the census of 1860, there were 3,953,760 slaves in the upper and the lower South. So currently, there are more Africans who live in America in the system of mass incarceration in this country than there were slaves in 1860. What kind of stat is that? So what we're looking at is structural racism. Racism that is embedded in the fabric of American society. This is a challenge to black America, and it's a challenge to white American citizens who acknowledge white privilege and who seek to work on behalf of truth, justice, and human rights. We have no right to point our fingers at other countries and talk about human rights violations here and there, when in this country, we are the biggest human rights violator in the world. So how did this come to be? How did mass incarceration come to be the state in which we live? And an almost invisible state. Because for so many people whose lives are not touched by mass incarceration, they had no concept that it existed in this form. By a simple raise of hands, how many people were familiar with some of the stats and the words that I've just put forth? Okay. And that leaves so many people who had no idea that mass incarceration exists in this state. And that's why it can exist. Because it's invisible, it's insidious, it's in rural America, it's not in your face, it doesn't affect you or your family personally, but when it does, you become instantly aware of just what mass incarceration is. So, going back to the beginning and the transition from slavery to a free society. I'm very much of a historian. I've always loved history from the time I was a little kid. You know, other kids were running outside playing, and I did that too, but I was inside with the books reading. I learned how to read when I was 4 years old, and history has always been a great love of mine. So when I look back on the history of America after the Civil War, people do not really focus on the enormity of the task of moving millions of slaves who were, for the most part, uneducated in literacy terms, because the slave master didn't want you to read and write, who were dependent upon a dominant class for their very lives, into a state where they could stand on their own 2 feet and move forward. That was an immense undertaking. Study the history of Reconstruction. Study the decades after the Civil War, the immense amount of time that went into establishing free schools and historically black colleges. And one of my heroes is Booker T. Washington. Many people look at him as an Uncle Tom. He advocated, vocation, farms. Booker T. Washington was a man of his times. He looked around him and said, this is the condition of black people in this country, and this is what is necessary to move them forward. And at Tuskegee Institute, he trained literally thousands of teachers, carpenters, plumbers, bricklayers, who went out across the South and established vibrant black communities that supported free people and moved forward. That is an immensely enriching part of our history that rarely gets the full credit that it deserves. I feel that Booker T. Washington should have a statue in Washington, D.C., just like Martin Luther King. And when you talk about the true leaders of black American history, he's one of the giants, because his work stands to this day. And that is the mark of true leadership. Yet, in that period of time, there was great fear in the white South of this now free population. So many systems of control were put into place to restrict that population. Also look at the fact that the South was ravaged by the Civil War. That's where the war was fought. So there was massive rebuilding that had to be done. So many times, mass incarceration was used as a tool to rebuild. If you give black males sentences and you put them on work crews, they have to rebuild the infrastructure that is now torn apart. And that was a part of the plan for Reconstruction. So mass incarceration is not something that just happened on its own. It was planned. It was structured. It was moved forward. In association with mass incarceration comes social injustice, because you can't just mistreat someone for no reason. Even rational people don't see that. So there has to be a reason. There has to be a crime committed. In the South, in the late 1800s through the 1930s, lynching was used as a tool of mass control and a way to justify the treatment of black males. From the years 1882 through 1951, 3,437 black males were lynched in this country. And when I say lynched, I'm not just talking about hanging. I'm talking about burning at the stake, maiming, dismemberment, castration. To be burned alive is a terrible punishment. But these sort of images and activities were propagated to support the illusion that black males were so dangerous that they had to be controlled. And it could justify a system of mass incarceration. So when you look at I Cant Breathe and Eric Garner, the rhetoric surrounding the deaths of young black men at the hands of law enforcement, realize that this is nothing new. It is just now you have social media, you have cell phones, you have Facebook, Instagram, you have ways of instantaneously putting the image forward so that ordinary people can see it and say, what is wrong with America? How can we treat people like this? How can we murder a 12-year-old boy playing in a park with a toy gun? Is there no thought process? I could stand on the stage all day and detail atrocities, tell you history. But what is of far greater value is to explore the solutions to these problems. As you might have guessed, I travel around and I talk a lot. It's been a wonderful part of my life back in society to be able to talk for a living, and to be able to think for a living, to be able to take the ideas that we spent so many hours debating in prison cells, gymnasiums like this, on the yard, and to bring them to persons who can value them. So as I travel and I speak and I lecture and I do workshops, seminars, as I listen and learn, I rarely speak about white privilege, mass incarceration, oppression, and the system without also talking about black responsibility. For mass incarceration is solely aimed at the black community. That is the reality of it. You can say other things, you can think other things, but for those of us who live there, who've lived inside of prisons, who deal with the police, who deal with the courts, we know who this system is structured for. So we must take responsibility for our own lives and our own destiny. We can't wait for the very system that oppresses us to transform itself into our benefactor. That's not a logical premise. And above all, I'm a logical person. So let's talk about some of the hard struggles that face the black community in America. Because there are certain things that we are up against. Discrimination, institutionalized racism in employment, housing, law, those areas are there. There's no getting around that. We can fight against it, struggle, lobby, seek to change laws. That's the task for a strategic plan. That's long range. As I said earlier, an $80 billion system is not going to be dismantled overnight. So let's talk about what we can do as a black community. And these are areas that I hold very close to my heart. Education, employment, entrepreneurship, community building, family building, a decrease in criminal activity, less reliance on external programs, and a refusal to organize and work in a united manner. These are things that we must focus on in our communities, in addition to the work that is being done by the greater society. So let me explain each point. As black people, we must organize and work in a united way to consistently move things forward and stop being reactive and instead be proactive. I got so tired of being invited to candlelight visuals. Is that my time? Are you kidding me? How much time I got left? Oh, man. Boy, I was just getting on a roll. All right. Let me knock this off, and then I'll incorporate some of the questions. Instead of reacting to the deaths of our young men by police, we need to be actively working in our community to change their lives before they get to the point where they are in contact with police, in police custody, or in the mass incarceration system. This is what we do at the Center for Returning Citizens. We work with at-risk youth before they are incarcerated. We also do reentry work. We deal with folks who are coming home. We do pre-entry work with those who are on bail and who are trying to stay out of the system. But I feel the most important work that we do as an organization is the work we do with the kids so that they never walk in our footsteps and they never sit in the cells that we sit in. Criminal activity. We can't tolerate criminal activity in our communities. As a former gangster, as a former criminal, I will tell you the truth. Many times in our communities, we turn a blind eye to criminal activities, and that encourages the police to come into our neighborhoods and turn it into an armed camp, and it feeds mass incarceration. So if your son is selling drugs around the corner and you're allowing that, you are part of mass incarceration. You're allowing him to destroy our neighborhoods. Building strong families. Strong families are the foundation of strong communities. And that means getting married, being loyal to your mate, fathering children in your household, not in other households. It means raising children, paying bills, paying child support, being a good father. It means not leaving your family to be supported by the state, as I did and many others did in our community. Community building is of utmost importance. A community is a place where you build families, where you create alliances, where you create economic power. When we don't control the wealth in our communities, we don't own the stores and the businesses, and we can't employ our young people, we do not have communities. We just have neighborhoods where we live. And there's a big difference. Education. We must educate ourselves. One of the craziest things that Congress did was take the Pell Grants out of prisons. I was on my way to a bachelor's degree in 1996. Congress took all the money out. I had to wait until 2009 to finish my bachelor's degree. Education raises the mindset of a person. Once you educate someone, you raise his worldview, his outlook. You show him a different view of the world and of himself. In the classes we teach, We teach ethics, critical thinking, social responsibility, parenting in a real way. I see you. I'm going to take that sign from you. The reality is, in our community, there are so many things that we must do to battle mass incarceration on a real level. And hope in the question period, you ask me, what can you do to help us? Now I'm kind of free from the podium, and I can wander around and ask questions. Can you hear me clearly? Okay. So we got about 15 minutes for questions? 10? It's because I talk too long. Any questions? Yes.
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry, I'm sick. Hi, my name is Brianna Robinson. I'm studying business and black studies here at the college.
A little louder.
I really enjoyed your talk, especially the part at the end when you were talking about economic stability and business development in black communities. And I'm wondering what role you think black women played, because you didn't mention them outside of the context of black people in your talk.
Well, I think that black women are the foundation of our society. In my personal family, on my mother's side, we have 6 aunts. On my father's side, 4 aunts. In my family, the black women in our family run our family. And we're smart enough to get out of the way and listen to them. Black women have traditionally built our community. Right now, 60% of the households in black communities are headed by black females. Entrepreneurship is essential for our community. Unless we build our own businesses, our money continually flows out of our communities. In normal communities, a dollar will circulate 6 to 7 to 8 to 10 times throughout all the neighborhood businesses before it goes somewhere else. In our community, it's from our pockets to the merchants of another race. So our money has no value, it's gone. Our money builds other communities. Until we realize that we must invest in our own community and come together with our dollars and build things, we're always going to be victims of mass incarceration because we're too tightly involved in the underground economy, the black market economy, that has no value on the real level of society. Does that kind of answer your question?
Thank you.
All right. Next.
How are you doing? My name is Echo. I'm a senior here. I have like 2 questions. So first question is, what are your tips as far as like personal growth and like self-development, you know, getting your mindset in that proper state of mind? And my second question is like, what can I do as like a black male, you know, to give back to my community, and like how to strengthen my community and bring us all together so we could not be a product of mass incarceration?
2 very good questions. One, self-growth and transformation is the foundation of what I'm saying. You know, if you listen to what I said earlier, you know, my first 2 years of incarceration, that's all I did was look at myself and see, what do I have to change? What basic part of my character is so flawed that I'm in this situation? So evaluation is essential. Then you must create a life plan for yourself. What do you need to do to move toward your goals? What is your overall life goal? And then what are the short-term goals that you need to set so you can reach that? And what are the things that you need to put into place to effectively reach those goals? You have to be thinking all the time. In terms of what you can do as a young black male, is one, be a role model. Be a role model in all areas of your life. Be hardworking. Save your money. Attain. Teach those who are younger around you, who respect you. You have a girlfriend?
No.
No? I'm sure you will have. You're a handsome young guy.
Thank you.
As you attain a girlfriend, treat her in a manner that shows she is loved and appreciated. When you get married, be faithful to her. Raise your family. Teach your sons that they are the foundation stones of the black community. Teach your daughters that they are the daughters of life itself. Understand who you are and create a vision for yourself and for your family and link with those of the same mind. That's so important for young black men to see themselves as a part of a family and not a part of like some little cliques here and there, or 29th Street, or West Side. That's ridiculous. We are all part of the African family. And if we don't see ourselves as a family, then who will? The system doesn't. The system sees us all as the same. We have to see ourselves as different. All right?
Thank you.
How you doing?
Hi. My name is Nadia, and I'm a junior here. So you talked a lot about how we have to support ourselves economically, but in the sociology class I was taking, they talked about how redlining was a system of creating like a way to stop black people from receiving loans to own their own houses and build their own businesses. So I just wanted to know if you think that still has an effect today, and like how we should go about just overcoming the like curse of the past.
It definitely still has an effect. When I was talking about the institutional barriers that we face, those are some of the barriers. But what I'm saying is that we need to look past those barriers in creative ways to come together. For example, in some Asian neighborhoods, they don't go to Wells Fargo Bank when they want to open a business. In their neighborhood, there's an association of older men who control some wealth in that community, and they finance the others. And because they come together and they bring their resources together and they create business opportunities. It is not that black people don't have disposable wealth. It's that we dispose of our wealth. Bring it together. Trust the next person. 4 or 5 guys get together, start a little grocery store. Start a hot dog cart. Start anything to generate money. We have to start generating businesses. As long as we are a nation of consumers instead of entrepreneurs, we're always going to be on the bottom of the social class. Yes.
My name is Chamberlain Myers, and I'm from McCaskey High School. And my question is, to what degree do you believe that positive change has to come from within the black community as opposed to like other communities?
I think that 80% of the change has to be generated within our own communities. Our organization welcomes the assistance of faith-based communities, universities, colleges, corporations. We exist upon donations to power the Center for Returning Citizens. So on that note, if anybody wants to write a check, I'm available. But the reality is the work that we are doing. In our after-school program, we're teaching our kids. In our counseling sessions, we are keeping guys out of robbery situations, out of drug dealing. We are teaching that change is possible. We are role models. We aren't telling you to do anything we haven't done. So when a young guy comes in my office and tries to tell me what he can't do, I'm not trying to hear that. Because I've been where he's been, and I've been where he's going. So we aren't the ordinary social workers. And our language doesn't reflect it either. We get very raw, because that's the reality of what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the street. We're in the street. Don't bring me no bullshit. You got to do this, this, and this, or you're going back to jail. And when you go back to jail, don't call our phone, because I told you in advance what's going to happen to you. That's the reality of it. That's what we do.
Hi, my name's Vaughn Lefevre. My wife works here on the staff at Millersville. And I wanted to get your perspective on how the prison system can change to affect the people there and make them have a change.
Great question. Prison should be a think tank. For many people, prison is the first time in their life when they have time to really take stock of their situation and they have time to learn. They're not in the street. Nobody's shooting at you. All the drama's past. You now have time to effectively change your life. And if you can do that, it's a powerful thing. We're almost out of time. Go ahead.
One thing I really appreciate your presentation, but one of the points that you hit is, having a time of self-reflection in the penitentiary. But what is your comment on, the jails becoming like networks for gangs to go in, get networked with other gangs, and so like the prison becomes this like gangster network instead of like a place for healing and rehab.
You've been watching A&E, haven't you?
What's that?
I see you've been watching A&E, those prison shows on A&E.
Something like that.
Yeah, okay, that's what I figured. Disregard that. That's Hollywood. No, the reality is there's a lot of network in prison. There's a lot of people become better bank robbers, better drug dealers, better criminals due to association. I mean, that's the reality. If you put 1,000 people with criminal backgrounds in one place, they are going to tell stories, and those who want to be educated in that sense are going to educate themselves. But by the same token, those who want a better life can influence the slower ones to look at life on a real level. And that's